Hello team and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan Emmett Pierce. Ukraine War News Update, second part thereof for the 15th of November 2023. Sorry I'm a little bit delayed. I got sidetracked watching a bit of Taskmaster. It's a bit of a favourite of mine and goodness me, suddenly I'm late and I do apologise. I'm here now. We are going to look at the military aid section of this video. The EU has provided an additional $118 million in humanitarian aid for Ukraine. It's providing that for humanitarian aid operations and also 10 million euros to support Ukrainian refugees and their hosting in Moldova, the European Commission has announced yesterday. So that's good news. Again, on the EU, the Commissioner said the EU can produce 1 million shells per year with enough effort from member states. So this is this idea that, or this pledge from the EU that they, together, with the member states, will provide 1 million shells within a year for Ukraine. And then I reported recently that we're halfway through the year and only 30% have been provided. And then there's been lots of talk over the last week that they just won't be able to achieve this. That the producers haven't ramped up enough production capacity, that there are bottlenecks, etc., etc. Well, the European Commissioner Thierry Breton has said that the EU is capable of producing 1 million artillery shells per year by the spring, provided enough effort from member states is forthwith. Now, he says, quote, "I am responsible for the production capacity of ammunition, so I can confirm that the goal of producing more than 1 million ammunition rounds annually can be achieved." Notably, Ukraine's Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba and German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius said earlier that the EU's plan to provide Ukraine with 1 million shells a year will likely miss the March 2024 deadline. It's going to be pretty close, isn't it? They need an awful lot more. They need another 700,000 shells by March. Hopefully they can achieve that, and it will require, I guess, European defence entities to really up their game, which then will depend possibly on raw materials, explosives production, as well as steel and whatnot. There has been this desire, certainly from people like France. I talk so often about military aid to Ukraine being a positive sum gain. So it's about nations getting a boost, an economic boost out of providing stuff for Ukraine. It's not just about giving. Yeah, there's giving old kit, but then there's replacing that with new stuff for yourself. So you're upgrading your own equipment, your own armed forces, and giving older stuff away to Ukraine, or you are building stuff in your own defense industries and giving that to Ukraine. So you are creating jobs, you're getting tax revenue, etc., etc. France, at the beginning of this pledge, so when this was announced, the EU pledged these 1 million rounds, said we want that all to come from inside Europe. And the problem then presented that we don't think we can do that with just European industries. There just isn't the capacity to do that, especially if you're talking within a year. We need to go outside the EU. So France were big on that. And this then talks to this idea of positive sum game. But when you make big pledges, like 1 million in a year, it might be that some of that does have to come from outside of the EU, and therefore is money in the coffers of non-EU states, even though that the money is effectively coming from the EU. So there has been that dynamic. Ukraine is to receive 25 refurbished Leopard 1A5s next year, according to Rheinmetall. They are due a good 100 plus of these, I thought. So obviously a number of these are going to be coming from entities other than Rheinmetall. The agreement with the Ukrainian government includes 25 main battle tanks, 5 Berger Panzer II repair and recovery vehicles, and 2 training tanks. Now, if we look at the details of this is according to Euromaidan. The German arms maker Rheinmetall has entered into a contract with the Ukrainian government to supply 32 Leopard 1 systems. So that's 25 main battle tanks and the rest sort of other vehicles, including driver training tanks, and it includes training, logistics, spare parts and maintenance. According to the company's press release, the Leopard 1 systems are being overhauled and readied for use at Rheinmetall's plants in Germany's Unterlüß and Kassel. areas. So Rheinmetall has already been contracted to supply a total of 80 Marder infantry fighting vehicles to Ukraine. A majority of these Marder vehicles have already been delivered and are active in Ukraine's ongoing military operations. The company is prepared to deliver an additional 20 Marders pending an order. Ukraine is expected to receive 5 Caracal airmobile capable vehicles in late 2023 and early 2024. In fact, we have that here. Rheinmetall will supply 5 Caracal vehicles to Ukraine. In that time period, the assault vehicle can be used in various roles during airborne. So that's it. It looks a bit like a Humvee, but a bit lighter. Airborne operations as a basic armored personnel carrier, medical support vehicle, or as a transport vehicle. There you go. So that is that. Anyway, the Euromonitor press continues. The Rheinmetall will also supply Ukraine with 14 Leopard 2A4 tanks on behalf of the Dutch and Danish governments next year. So they're still due to give some more Marders, some more Leopard 2s, 14 of them, and 32 Leopard 1 as well in various configurations. And I assume that it'll be other defense contractors who will be giving the rest of those Leopard 1s that are due to go to Ukraine. Right, Slovakia will finance the production of 2 Bozena 4 mine clearance vehicles. They've already given a number of these to Ukraine. These are remote vehicles, remotely controlled vehicles. At the beginning of 2024, the vehicles should be sent to the Kherson region. Slovakia will also provide humanitarian assistance for the winter period and share its experience in mine clearance. So they have said that we are not going to provide military assistance. That's what Robert Fico, the new Prime Minister, has announced. But they are going to continue giving humanitarian assistance to Ukraine. Now, General Zaluzhny has held calls with the French Chief of Defense Staff. That is, I mean, who knows what's going to come out of that, but hopefully going to solidify relations between Ukraine and France and see more valuable French kit coming Ukraine's way. Hyundai and Ukrenigo sign a memorandum of understanding. So this is the Ukraine state grid operator and South Korea's and Hyundai Engineering Construction getting together to work more closely going forward. So that's good news. Now, this is an interesting observation. So Russian-Ukrainian war is mostly an artillery war. I mean, you could talk about drones being part of that and maybe a proxy for artillery in many contexts. Nonetheless, it is mostly an artillery war. Number two, Russian artillery production fully relies upon a few dozen GFM Steyr, that's an Austrian company, radial forging machines. 3, which rely upon the continuous supply of expendables from the original producer. It is the bottleneck. Targeted. Wow. Austria, neutral country, it plays a very important role in allowing, you could say, the Russian military-industrial complex to continue to make the most important aspect of the war, most important component of the war, artillery ammunition. Either hit those factories or sanction that company. Why? One presumes they are still able to provide these expendables to Russia. Why is that still the case, if that is indeed the case? Right, moving on to geopolitical subjects now. And the Chinese leader Xi Jinping has arrived in the US for the first time in 6 years. He will attend the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit in San Francisco and meet with the US president today. Xi Jinping will be in the US on a visit until the 17th, so a good couple of days in the US. This is really important. Going to be interested to see what comes out of this. Hopefully something in favor of closer US-China ties, such that Taiwan doesn't become a thing and such that China doesn't as freely support Ukraine as it does. I mean, it's not as much as it probably wants to, or at least as Russia wants it to, but it still is propping up Russia to a large degree. American officials are now signaling that they believe China's economic slowdown, and there's been so much talk about this economic slowdown, and it's been on the cards for years, but it finally might actually be happening, has bought some time for Taiwan, with Mr. Xi in a poor position to risk broad economic sanctions. So China don't want to go down the route of invading Taiwan, given their precarious economic status at the moment. You can argue both ways on that actually war is a good economic stimulus, but I don't think where China is is dependent on so much international trade, exports to so many countries, particularly the EU, particularly America, that if those nations and trade blocs were to sanction China, China would be screwed. And this is what is buying Taiwan time, maybe time that they can use to properly defend themselves or prepare themselves. And for the rest of the world to prepare themselves. The US House of Representatives adopted a 2-month government funding budget without aid for Ukraine and Israel, according to CNN. The decision was made to avoid the shutdown. This really annoys me. It really does annoy me. Like, Mike Johnson is irritating on so many levels for me. And this is another one of them, but it's a super important one. He and some of his colleagues are really endangering Ukraine going forward. Just it's not good enough. US House of Representatives has approved a bill for a 2-step temporary funding bill for the government with no funds for Ukraine and Israel. The combined package, which includes aid to Israel, Ukraine, Taiwan, and funds for the US border security, will be considered after Thanksgiving, CNN reports. The holiday is celebrated in the US on November the 23rd. So you've now got another 8 days before it's even going to be considered. Why? Whose side are you on? Whose bloody side are you on? This went a bit viral yesterday. A huge bit of news, really. A huge scoop from my colleagues. A leading Western journalist who has long been considered one of Germany's top independent experts on Russia received at least 600,000 euros in undisclosed offshore payments from companies linked to the oligarch close to Putin. Now, I love journalism like this. This is from The Guardian, they're part of something called the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists. This is a great group of newspapers who have done things that I'm going to talk about. The Cyprus Confidential has just come out, but Deforestation Inc., Pandora Papers, the Panama Papers, and other investigations as well. Those huge investigations that have to be done by teams of people because they're looking through millions of documents in any one investigation. Like the Cyprus Confidential that's just come out is 3.6 million documents, I think. You can't do that unless you've got a big team of people working. Now, you might ask why I often refer to The Guardian. And yes, it's politically aligned to my political positioning. Okay, there is that. But actually what I love about The Guardian, and this is why I support them when I can, is how they're funded, right? And I don't know if many of you know this, but they were until recently, but it's basically the same situation, owned by something called the Scott Trust, which is a charitable foundation existing between 1936 and 2008. Is now the same thing, but in a different form, which aimed to ensure the paper's editorial independence in perpetuity. So maintaining its financial health to ensure it did not become vulnerable to takeovers by commercial media groups. So basically, The Guardian's made a loss forever until relatively recently, and that's why they changed their system slightly, but it's still the same ethics. And it's made a loss, so no one really wants to buy it. So that allows it to do investigative journalists, ethical journalism, so on and so forth, and be just, I think, forthright in what it sets out to do. It's not beholden to a board. It's not beholden to shareholders, to advertisers. It allows it to then report how it wants and on what it wants. That's why I like it. So in 2008, its assets were transferred to a limited company, but Scott Trust Limited, but it's got the original intention remaining the same. Staff have been reassured that the purposes of the company remain the same. It's just, The Guardian is the only British national daily to conduct since 2003 an annual social, ethical, environmental audit in which it examines, under the scrutiny of an independent external auditor, its own behaviour as a company. It's also the only British national newspaper to employ an internal ombudsman called the Reader's Editor to handle complaints and corrections. Now, since 1821, the mission of The Guardian has been to use clarity and imagination to build hope. Its organisation delivers fearless and investigative journalism, giving a voice to the powerless and holding power to account. Our independent ownership structure means we are entirely free from political and commercial influence. Only our values determine the stories we choose to cover relentlessly and courageously. So since, as of recently, half of their revenue now comes from readers, donating money to them, which has actually allowed it to make money for the first time ever. Anyway, I just thought, because you might say, why do you always go to Reuters, people like Reuters, Associated Press, those press agencies I think are really useful. But I do go to The Guardian quite a bit. I just, yeah. Anyway, that's my tuppence there. But this piece of journalism has shown that someone who wrote 2 books on Putin that were somewhat nice to Putin ends up having $600,000 euros in his account. So, a leading Western journalist who's long been considered one of Germany's top independent experts on Russia has received at least 600,000 euros in undisclosed offshore payments from companies linked to the oligarch host of Vladimir Putin. Leaked files have revealed. So, Hubert Seipel, an award-winning filmmaker and author, was paid money in installments, which documents suggest was to support his work on 2 books he wrote that chart Putin's rise to power and offer portrayals described by many as sympathetic to the Russian president. So this is really controversial, I think, much more in Germany at the moment, as I believe he's a fairly sort of famous journalist, but in the pocket of Putin, essentially, and financially. So, apparently his publishers had no knowledge of this, but we'll see how that plays out. Now, in terms of the UK, this is really excellent. Where the UK might not be able to supply as much military aid at the moment as possible, our cupboards are bare, we can help in other ways, and this is a really significant piece of help. So the UK is in a very unique position whereby pretty much all maritime insurance through Lloyd's, essentially, is based in the UK. And actually, this has been really beneficial for sanctions on Russia, well, in terms of the oil cap. So because the UK can essentially, if it really wants to, have some influence over that maritime insurance, there has been the old price cap move has been this move to say, right, none of you insurers can insure vessels that are selling oil over $60 a barrel. And because there's essentially a kind of monopoly, it's not a single firm, but there's like a geographical monopoly, if you like, on maritime insurance. It means that ships that want to break those rules and carry oil at above $60 a barrel can't get insurance. Now, not only is that a problem for if something goes wrong with that ship, but it means that they generally can't dock around the world because you need insurance in order to pull up at a port. And so this is a real problem, and that's allowed, in the main, the oil price cap to work. There have been sort of loopholes, etc., etc. But here we had the ship in Odessa that was hit recently. That was a Liberian flagged ship. There were 3 Filipino crew members that were injured. I think the pilot was actually Ukrainian, not Filipino, who went on board to then take the ship into Port to moor it. He was killed. Anyway, that really rocks insurance industry, and you're like, right, there's something called war risk, and the war risk insurance is then going to go through the roof. And that will then make it untenable for ships to go into Odessa to get the grain out, which then affects Ukraine's ability to do trade and to make money off the grain, and finances its own nationhood as well as its own defense. It's really important that ships are able to freely get into the Black Sea, load up with grain and get out of the Black Sea and do this trade. It's massively important for global food supplies. It's massively important for Ukraine's income. And the UK government has then gone in and said, right, because that insurance is going through the roof, because that missile that hit that ship, we are going to underwrite at least some of the insurance so that it's not as crazy as expensive as it was going to be, that would then like inhibit this trade. A total of 14 UK insurance companies have agreed to participate in an effort, which this is Rishi Sunak, he highlighted as the latest steps in support from the West. And that's fantastic. He also reported that the Multilateral Investment Guarantee Agency of the World Bank Group has already provided over $166 million in insurance coverage, with negotiations ongoing over new projects. The US International Development Finance Corporation, DFC, has also approved 5 new projects worth over $380 million, so on and so forth. This is really important. Actually, that wasn't Sunak, that was Shmihal, I think. So this is really good from the UK government to do this underwriting to help get the grain exported. Right, under new possible EU plans, Denmark will be tasked with inspecting and potentially blocking Russian oil tankers passing through its waters. Roughly 60% of Russian total maritime exports crosses the Danish Straits on its way to international markets. Hugely important because, like I was just saying, if there is a way that Russia can get away with selling their Urals oil, their oil at over $60 a barrel by doing, whatever funky thing, that those ships need to be inspected, and one of the main routes is past Denmark. So if Denmark gets to say, no, that ain't happening, then this will affect Russia's ability to make money, and Russia's ability to prosecute this war. Right. Next, we have... sorry, I just got out of order there. The IEA says that Russian revenues from oil exports have dropped due to sanctions and global market forces. Russian revenue from oil exports in October dropped by almost 2.5% from the previous month, in part due to Western sanctions against those violating the $60 per barrel price cap. The International Energy Agency said Russia received an estimated $18.34 billion in revenue from crude oil and petroleum product exports in October, down from $18.8 billion in September. So another drop month on month. Some of that will be, as mentioned, due to sanctions. Some of it will be due to just as there is recessionary pressures around the world. One of the things that generally you will see drop when people aren't spending money is you will see a drop in oil demand. As a result of a drop in oil demand, groups like OPEC will get together and say, right, we need to cut supply to keep that equilibrium between supply and demand in place so that they're still making the requisite amount of money. But things like that will hurt suppliers like Russia, especially if they're producing the crude and not so much of the refined oil. So it's both going to be economic pressures, market pressures as much as sanctions, but both those together have meant that Russia. Oh, what am I keep doing? Russia are having issues with making the amount of money they would want to make. Okay, new leaked documents in Cyprus are great, spilling all sorts of murky Russian secrets. Cyprus was awash with dirty money for well over a decade and still home to many oligarchs. So you got Turkey, you got Cyprus, which is half run by Turkey, half run by Greece anyway. So you got Turkey, Cyprus, and London are the main places in the world, it seems, for Russian money to be laundered. And this is something that's pretty much an open secret. It's not that much of a secret. Well, this is another phenomenal piece of investigative journalism by that group I was telling you about, the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists. The BBC reports that a secret $40 million deal links Abramovich, to Putin's wallets. Now, Roman Abramovich was previously the owner of Chelsea Football Club, a really high value brand, I guess, in the UK in the footballing industry. But Abramovich himself was a very famous person in the UK. He was often on TV, you saw him at football matches, so on and so forth. And then after he was sanctioned by the UK, he's not been sanctioned by the US, interestingly, and he's doing lots of stuff in the US, but he's been sanctioned by the UK, had to sell Chelsea and frozen assets and all sorts of stuff. He is someone that was also trying to broker deals between between Putin, basically, in the West. Well, now leaked documents reveal a money trail linking him, because he always denied he was anything to do with funding the Kremlin, anything to do with Putin directly, and therefore it's unfair that he was being sanctioned. Well, new documents reveal a trail linking him to two men dubbed the wallets of Vladimir Putin. So the former Chelsea Football Club owner has been sanctioned by the UK and EU, has previously denied any financial relationship with the Russian leader, but these show a secret $40 million deal in 2010. He's not responded to requests for comment, but the secret deal transferred shares in a highly profitable Russian advertising company, Video International, for less than they appear to be worth, from companies ultimately owned by a trust connected with Mr. Abramovich to two members of Putin's inner circle. They in turn received millions of dollars in dividends. This was BBC Newsnight, BBC Verify and Panorama partnered with the Bureau of Investigative Journalism to uncover the revelations as part of the Cyprus Confidential, a global investigation led by reporters of International Consortium of Investigative Journalists and Paper Trail Media. Confidential records reveal that one of the men involved in the secret deal was Sergei Roldugin, a close friend of the Russian president. Another one was a chap called Alexander Plekov, a biochemist turned businessman, also from St. Petersburg. Now, President Putin's stated salary in 2021 was just over $100,000. So how can Putin, who was in the FSB and has only got a $100,000 job, $100,000 salary, so okay, that's high, but how is he the richest man in the world? And of course, this shows that he's just existing in a kleptocracy. However, there are rumours his fortune could be worth anywhere between $125 billion and $200 billion, hidden away in a network of shell companies and accounts of friends. And Mr. Plekov has been sanctioned by the UK government, and Mr. Roldugin has also been sanctioned by the UK, EU and US, which described him as a custodian of President Putin's offshore wealth. The Cyprus Confidential investigation is based on 3.6 million confidential corporate records from companies providing offshore services in Cyprus, and has focused on its close financial relationship with Russia and now sanctioned oligarchs, many of whom have used the island to manage their secret offshore holdings. This is a really overt connection of Russian oligarchs to the functioning of Putin and the Kremlin. It connects money directly from these people to the Kremlin. And there's a reason why oligarchs are being sanctioned around the world. Perhaps not enough of them, and perhaps not as uniformly as one would like. As you can see here, like Abramovich not being sanctioned in the US is a bit of an issue. This is an excellent BBC article that really talks you through all these connections, how it's connected to Putin's wallet, and ends up saying, meanwhile, reports suggest Mr. Abramovich now spends his time between Russian resort of Sochi, Istanbul and Tel Aviv. Of course, 15% of Israelis speak Russian, so a lot of Russian connections there. He has Russian, Israeli and also Portuguese passports. How convenient. The oligarch remains the subject of sanctions in the UK and EU, but not in the US, where he's understood to still hold considerable assets. And there's his massive yacht. Right, moving on. EU reporter says Elon Musk is to speak at a Russian AI conference. Tesla founder and Twitter owner is slated to speak at AI Journey 2023 about Grok, a new competitor to ChatGPT. I guess that shows where his allegiances lie. And then finally, the collapse on the Polish-Ukrainian border. About 3,000 trucks are blocked in the direction of Jahadin and Korchowa, Krakovets, and rather Ruska. Anyway, a lot of points are being blocked by Polish truckers. This is a nightmare. It will affect the military aid getting to Ukraine through Poland. It will affect all sorts of stuff. Obviously, trade. This is a real issue both for Poland and Ukraine and needs to be sorted out ASAP. Anyway, thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe and share. Till the pet. Speak to you soon.